Well, now, ladies and gentlemen, how do we understand today's incredible espionage going on, this fight between this globalist elite, the deep penetration of both Israel by Russia, China, which is really City of London, and of course the deep penetration of America by Israel, Russia, and China via Israel. They opened all the doors. Their Bolshevik Jews have been pouring into the United States since the 1870s. Remember the Hofjuden, the court Jews of Europe, mixing with the noble families of Europe. We did it in the previous videos. I'll make a little one called Court Jews, little playlist. Now we can understand how deep and how bad this penetration really is by understanding past his prologue. Well, there's a man called Peter Wright, and in 1986 it was one of the biggest.
Here, newspapers campaigning to publish the memoirs of the former MI5 officer Peter Wright were warned in the appeal court today that they could be in contempt of court. This latest twist in a legal saga that has lasted for more than a year comes just as the Sunday Times is preparing to print a second extract from Wright's Spycatcher book this weekend.
Espionage cases in history that was fought in Australia by Malcolm Turnbull, his lawyer.
The book, of course, was Peter Wright's memoirs. Peter Wright had been an MI5 agent, and Mrs. Thatcher took the view that no MI5 officer should ever be allowed to reveal anything about their work.
Who happened to be the lawyer for Kerry Packer, who happened to be best friends with Abe Saffron, involved in heroin trafficking. Yes, you can't make this stuff up. We'll get there, Jimmy Goldsmith. We'll get them all in, don't worry. But Peter Wright, this gentleman right here, Peter Wright was an MI5 spy catcher, counterintelligence, a spy hunter. And he wrote a book called Spycatcher. And the Thatcher government tried to put it down. And in that book, he claimed the head of MI5 was a Soviet asset. And not only that, Victor Rothschild, Harold Wilson, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and there's going to be familiar names when we start linking all together, including Robert Maxwell and all these Eastern Bloc Jews. This sounds so familiar. Now, this was in the 60s and 70s. He retired in 1975 and he retired to Tasmania. I remember when this all happened because Chernobyl had just happened as well. But I didn't grasp the gravitas of what he was talking about. He said half the British establishment were Soviet intelligence assets. Half the British establishment, which included Victor Rothschild, the father of Lord Jacob Rothschild, the cousin of Evelyn de Rothschild, and David de Rothschild. Soviet assets. So now we can link that with Nathaniel Rothschild. He's hanging with Baruch Lazar, the chief rabbi of Russia, Chabad Lubavitch, and they're all hanging at the Oxford group. Let's do a few quotes from the Mueller report. Here are some comments on Oleg Deripaska. Manafort recalled that he met Deripaska through his business partner at the time, Rick Davis. Davis had met Deripaska in 2003 through Nathaniel Rothschild, a British investment fund manager and scion of the Rothschild banking dynasty. According to open source information, Rothschild and Deripaska have had a relationship since at least 2003. Press reports further suggest that the relationship between the two men helped Deripaska secure the financing needed to cement the control of UC Rothschild in the early to mid-2000s. We of course remember Deripaska being told off from Vladimir Putin.
He demanded the owners, including billionaire Oleg Deripaska, sign an undertaking to restart the factories.
Вы подписали этот договор? Да. Олег Владимирович подписал? Что я не вижу вашей подписи? Идите сюда, подпишите. Идите ко мне. Да, договор.
Classic Putin.
So many connections, so little time. And here's Vladimir Putin fighting the evil Jews by hanging out with Gerhard Schroeder, the former Chancellor of Germany, who's also on the board of Rothschild. Oh, jolly good, tally-ho, fancy that. And of course, while we're talking about Paul Manafort, you know, the guy that was hanging out with Marine psychological warfare General Jim Jones and his son, also called Jim Jones. You know, 3EDC, LLC. You know all that stuff Patrick Berge told us about on Millie Weaver's Shadowgate. who's also hanging out with, guess who? Roger Stone. And Roger Stone is besties with Psychological Warfare Training Officer Robert David Steele. And they're all besties with good old Sheriff Israel of Chabad Lubavitch in Broward County, drug trafficking, close with the Clinton Foundation. My goodness, what is going on here? Well, shit gets deeper, but let's move on from this. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to put it all together. And when you understand, keep looking at the wrong camera, and when you understand Peter Wright, Spycatcher, and I've got extracts from his audiobook, you're going to freak out past his prologue. This has happened before. Then you will understand this deep penetration. You will put it all together. You will start to understand why it is London is known as Londonistan. Speaking of Londonistan, chaps, let's have another quote from that silly report called the Mueller Report, which nobody reads. It's more aptly called not Russiagate, but Israel Russiagate. So, here's what it says about Mr. Papadopoulos. Remember Mr. Papadopoulos and the Israeli press stating that Israelis are effing spies who should be killed by an unnamed source at the FBI? And they're a bunch of Mossad pretend Russian Jews? With that article in mind, let's quickly butt in here. This is what Senor Papadopoulos says about Londonistan. Are you ready? This is an email by Mr. Papadopoulos to his friend. I was recently hosted by the Israeli government after I delivered a talk at an energy and security conference there. They are ready to host Mr. Trump when the time is right for him and have also invited him to a big conference the largest newspaper there is hosting in July that Netanyahu will also be speaking at. The Russian government has an open invitation by Putin for Mr. Trump to meet him when he is ready as well. Quote, the advantage of being in London is that these governments tend to speak a bit more openly in neutral cities. Go and read that quote. Nothing to see here in the Mueller Report, which nobody bothers to read. Londonistan. London, Victor Rothschild, Lord Jacob Rothschild, Heinz Kissinger, Rupert Murdoch, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens. Do you see City of London written all over them? Boo the Jews, boo the Jews. But don't give me any facts. Tucker says they can only solve 9/11 if the CIA, the naughty CIA, will release the files. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can't see through Candace, her Scottish Rite Mason, homosexual boyfriend, the garbage they're spewing without actually telling you anything, I can't help you. Back to the video. Then you'll understand why MI5 and MI6 were complaining about all the British establishment with their London bank accounts with their Jewish oligarch friends, including Vladimir Putin himself. And they've all got their bank accounts in London while they shake a fist and say, we will nuke London. Their kids are in London private schools, Swiss private schools, German private schools, and they've even got their assets in Deutsche Bank. This is the great game. We're going to also understand the missing scientists, because when you hear Peter Wright speak or the descriptions of his narration, where he actually says when they started going after all the assets, they started disappearing and they started defecting and they also started to commit suicide. So let's have a good chinwag about all those missing scientists and some theories we can all go over. But first, let us attend.
In cyber is a real domain of power. In cyber is a real domain of power.
You're really going to like this one. I love big picture items and stringing the past with the present. We've gone over again and again that concept of 500 years of the Hofjuden, court Jews of Europe, from the court Jews to Rothschild. They lent money to the nobles, to the Fuggers, to the old Viennese families, to the Catholic Church, to kings and nobility. They would tell their king, you have a problem, a trading problem in France. My cousin Solomon is over there in France. Let me sort that out for you. You became the indispensable Jew.
The indispensable Jew.
I am so sick of these fake news people. Did you get the cash off Miriam?
Sure, boss.
If we exchange this bribe money in front of the press in plain view, it's legal. Howard, you are truly my indispensable due.
The fixer. Nothing's changed. And you see that unholy union of the nobles of Europe with the British Empire, Queen Elizabeth I, John Dee training with a Kabbalist in Vienna in the late 1500s, Cecil Lord have mercy, William Cecil and Walsingham, the two advisors to Queen Elizabeth I, and she would often go directly to John Dee over there in Oxford, where he was conjuring, doing spells, astrology, astronomy, all sorts of stuff, into the occult, which then turns into what? The Jews of Scotland, Scottish Rite Masonry. And you begin to see that unholy alliance. And when you understand that, you'll understand the network. From the former Chancellor, Gerhard Schroeder, on the board of Rothschild with David Evelyn de Rothschild. And there he is, best friends with Vladimir Putin. And you see that Putin is not penetrating Europe. Europe has penetrated Germany. The Rothschilds have penetrated Germany. That whole network, Rothschild's just the poster boy. There's a whole network of them. They all hate each other. King Charles is over in the US fighting for a go. He wants to control the Middle East, do a deal, like the good old days. And this is when we can understand how we got from there to here. 1870s, all the Bolshevik Jews being told by the rabbis, to the old court Jews, to now, because they were indispensable to the king, now they're married into the family. They married nobles' daughters. And also the attractive Jewish women were also marrying into noble families, changing their names. The Book of Esther, where Mordecai, her handler, tells her to marry the king of Persia, but don't let the king know of your Jewish origin. Then she gets the king to kill the enemies of the Jews. These are traditions within all of Judaism, including the Old Testament, Tanakh, which is half of the Christian Bible. But you see them moving 1870s Bolshevik Jews. They all changed their names. Come out of Lithuania, the old Russian Empire. They were also pouring into Palestine. You see three waves, 1870 on, post-1917 on, and then you see in the 1950s on. You see the Silva Master spy ring, Nathan Gregory Silva Master. Harry Dexter White, real name, some cliche Eastern Bloc Jewish name, Vovonovich. Changed his name to White. They changed their name to Black, to Gold, to Diamond, to Steel. Always changing their names. From their free name to their slave name to their free name. Milikowski becomes Netanyahu because Milikowski for Bibi is his slave name. It all comes out. It's right there in the Matrix. The Nebuchadnezzar, blah, blah, blah. All of this stuff. So you see them pouring into the United States and they're there to this day. And we can understand they're all over the world. They've all changed their names. They're black. They're white, they're redheads from Ireland, but all claiming some ethnic, cliche, racial nobility. All claiming to be sons and daughters and spiritual heirs of King David because they just do too much cocaine, have too much money, and too much time on their hands when they're killing hookers in their Belgium mansion estates and running pedophile rings, which is what they do. The compromise, the club on homosexuality, bisexuality, it's all here in Spycatcher. We're going to play the audio tracks. Then we're going to move into the Indian guy that was clearly murdered a couple of years ago. Tucker Carlson interviewed his mother. And remember, he made some allegations against good old Sam Altman. Sam Altman denies it all. Blah, 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 having sex with his sister, sexually assaulting his sister, all that good stuff. So we can see it all binding. Sam Altman, they're everywhere, they're in everything, and you judge people by their individual actions, guilt, mens rea, guilty mind. Just remember this. Jews, Jews, Jews. Yeah, we need to talk about the Jews, and we don't need to talk about them Tucker Carlson style. The Jews killed Jesus and killed Charlie Kirk did. No, we're not talking that style. We're not talking Candace Owens style with her limited hangouts, with her 8 minutes on 9/11 a year and a half ago. 8 minutes on 9/11. and she mentioned dancing Israelis and how she watched loose change. 8 minutes. I timed it. 8 minutes. That's your limited hangout. That's your heroes all getting put in place for you. So now let's get into the juicy real stuff. Remember, the Israeli press has been pushing this for 15 solid years, warning. I was warned by Jews, Chabad Jews, would you believe, back in 2005 about another guy, and I don't know if he was in Chabad because I never asked, Leon Wend, which started my journey, the Collins-class submarine, contracts with Australian Defence Industries, and graduates of Talpiot Program Unit 8200. Who can believe we were to be here on this day, including being raided over Jet Propulsion Laboratories? How about that?
To make links to supplement.
Yes, and often comes out with links and 9/11 conspiracies and that sort of stuff.
All right, okay.
And then all this blog stuff is all in there as well.
Okay, that's not under the scope of the warrant,
Yep.
with conspiracy theories and things like that. If it's anything to do with, like I said, jet propulsion throughs, the jet propulsion throughs, the jet propulsion throughs.
Oh, shit gets deeper. You'd think someone would interview me and ask me a direct question, but why do that? So let's get stuck in by listening to Peter Wright, or maybe just getting to know the guy briefly for a couple of minutes to give you an idea and how you must go and read the book. Because unfortunately, lazy people like me, Spycatcher is not an audiobook. But a book about the trial and Spycatcher is an audiobook, and that's what we're going to listen to right now. Okay. In this short segment, we're going to hear from the book To Catch a Spy, How the Spycatcher Affair Brought MI5 In from the Cold by Tim Tate. Tim Tate's a little bit sus himself, actually. We'll talk about him later. The British establishment is riddled with Soviet spies. You no doubt heard this at the beginning, and let me get your attention. If it sounds a bit dodgy, if you don't know, Audible now, you can't screen record. It goes, all the new DRM is coming in. You can't even screen record Audible anymore for segments. So I had to manually record it and then mess with it, and it sounds a bit tinny, but you'll get it. I've got in, I have in subtitles. Now listen, he's going to tell you, well, just listen. British establishment is riddled with Soviet spies, which is really what? City of London.
But as MI5's Annus Horribilis drew to a close, the agonizing and unresolved Peters investigation was about to be eclipsed by a new and even greater scandal. One that revealed Soviet penetration of not just the security service, but the very foundations of the British establishment: industry, science, the civil service, the British government, and the royal family.
And the royal family. Did you hear that? Industry. Let's go back. Do you want to listen to that again? Industry, science, the civil service, the British government, and the royal family. Wow. Does that sound familiar?
British establishment: industry, science, the civil service, the British government, and the royal family.
It's everywhere now. Soviet, old school, now Russian intelligence, now SVR, foreign intelligence, GRU. I think they just changed that name again. Military intelligence, long-term sleepers. They penetrated everywhere, right through Israel. They're right now into the highest levels of the high-tech security industry in America. They're running your water, your power, your sewage, running it directly. And now under Pax Silica, you are now demanded to put those Israeli, Russian, Israel, Russia. Never separate the two. If you want to say Israel, you make sure you add Russia. It's not Russiagate, it's Israel Russiagate. I want you to understand that it's the biggest espionage case in history. And guess who owns it? Which is why I sit in exile over here, because I won't shut up. Never will I shut up. These people need to be put up against a wall and at least charged with criminal negligence. So now we see how past is prologue. Nathan Gregory's Silva Master. You must read Diane West when she's not slagging off Muslims and Islam. Diane West writes the best stuff on this. PhD, historian, Red Thread. She's got multiple books. Look up Red Thread. She goes deeply into this stuff. Should be bestseller list, should be everywhere. She's kind of obscure and just sitting on Patreon. Next. Here we go. Does this remind you of Epstein? Rothschild, Epstein apartment, sex orgies, homosexual compromise. So this apartment was set up by none other than Victor Rothschild. He funded it on Bennett Street, I do believe. And he put his secretary in there to keep an eye on things. The secretary, Miss Mayer, later became his wife. They then produced Lord Jacob, who then produced Nathaniel, who hangs out now with Baron Lazar. You'll see how it all goes. We haven't even begun. This is going to be a long one. But listen up. This will put you in the right direction to start putting it all together, how deep it goes. So when you see that clown show, Mark Carney, the London central banker, alleged Prime Minister of Canada, all right, running around with his little puffy chest like a bantam rooster, running over, we're going to join the EU, to the most absurd levels, when he said in January with the Fabian socialist Chatham houseboy, Keir Starmer, the wet rag, that Thatcher would have devoured him and just eaten him alive. He's just looking at me, he's going, ugh, what is that? But there he is, Fabian socialist boy, Keir Starmer, and they're running to China in January with the London central banker, Mark Carney, saying, if we don't get everyone together, all right, we're not going to get a seat at the table with the Americans. We're going to be on the menu. And you saw him run in to see Xi. Xi just got rid of his general. He'd done this huge purge because he's still in City of London. They're fighting as we speak. That's why the Trump administration went in March 28. He went into Iran. It was a good move. Bibi didn't want this. Iran's their pet. That's the globalist pet. They're there to threaten Saudi Arabia and the UAE with a nuclear weapon. So they'll do a deal with Israel. That's why. I've explained it 1,000 times. Look at the playlist, link below. You'll see. I lay it out for you. I'm probably the only one right now on planet Earth doing this succinctly. But here we are. Why were they running around in January? Because they knew the next to go were the Straits of Hormuz and their little toy, Iran, who spend all day going, Saudi, Saudi, going after Saudi. Not Yahud. Yahud got, 15% of the missiles and drones? Saudi and the UAE got the rest. Fancy that. The sworn enemy of Yahud. Yahud got off pretty damn easy, wouldn't you say? And you'll work out Iran. Not Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He's the real Iranian nationalist. That's why they won't let him run when he called out the corruption of the clerics and, by deference, the Ayatollah. And the Ayatollah's son's got £300 million worth of assets sitting in London. Oh, now you're about to understand why and how. This is the network. They run Hezbollah, they run Hamas, they fund all the Islamic terror. All of it, just to justify this massive surveillance state on all of us. So now listen to this. So when you think Epstein and his apartment and his ranch and his island, right? Victor Rothschild did it first, at least in this modern incarnation. Are you ready? Listen up.
Of the phony war in the autumn of 1939. The following year, Rothschild advised the security service to take Blunt onto its staff.
Blunt was another Soviet asset.
And generously gave him the tenancy of the apartment. Even by the morally elastic standards of wartime London, the coterie of residents and guests who shuttled in and out of its front door were remarkably liberated. Many were also the nucleus of Blunt's 1940s espionage circle. Rothschild himself did not live there, but his MI5 secretary, lover and subsequent wife, Tess Mayer, another Cambridge alumnus, quickly moved in with Blunt. Before long, 2 other university chums joined the household. Patricia Rawdon-Smith, who worked variously in the War Office, Air Ministry and Foreign Office, and Guy Burgess.
Guy Burgess, another Soviet espionage, famous.
Until recently, a serving MI6 officer. The flat soon became the locus for informal meetings frequently attended by a growing circle of senior civil servants and intelligence officers. Less happily, it simultaneously earned an unsavory reputation for bed-hopping and partner-swapping. Promiscuity was far from unusual during the war. Impromptu bacchanalian couplings in nearby St. James's Park were frequent, spurred by the fear of imminent death and greatly assisted by the blackout. But the apparent intensity of the antics inside Benting Street was rather more ominous. According to a breathless 1956 newspaper account by Goronwy Rees, who had been the first to name Blunt as a spy, Burgess used the flat to satisfy both his espionage and sexual needs. It sometimes looked like a disorderly house, a brothel, in every sense of the term. The guy brought men along with whom he was conducting unnatural love affairs.
Unnatural love affairs, my goodness.
Nor was this merely salacious tabloid journalism. As a subsequent internal Downing Street report noted, stories abounded of the Bentinck Street flat as the scene of drunken orgies, during one of which Maclean was homosexually compromised, and of communist and sympathetic intellectuals. MI5 had turned a blind eye towards this activity, possibly because its own head of counter-espionage, Guy Liddell, was a frequent, if seemingly chaste, visitor. But as the months of Blunt's interrogations ground on, the flat's locus of illicit sex and known spies
sound like Epstein flat?
Demanded an urgent re-examination of all the Bentinck Street associates. Wright returned to MI5's old files and carried out new interviews with those who had made previous disclosures.
Yes, and half of them started dying. Fancy that. So, Rothschild, the apartment, sex orgies, homosexual compromise. Fancy that. Oh my goodness, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Now, this is quite fascinating. Harold Wilson was a Labour leader, which is like the Democrats, and he was alleged to have been a Soviet spy, and he clearly was, in my opinion. He clearly was. And hangs around all the right people. And what's interesting about this particular segment is this is going to talk about the assassination of, well, the alleged assassination of his predecessor. And with his predecessor's death from lupus, Harold Wilson became leader of the Labour Party. Now, it became known that the Soviets had bragged in a scientific paper that they could give someone lupus with some chemicals. And so it started to get around that, in fact, the guy that preceded Wilson had been killed by the Soviets. That's what they believed. They were willing to believe. Now, the author poo-poos this. But come on, how do you poo-poo it when there's already evidence there? Anatoly Golitsyn is mentioned, and he gets bagged all the time. Him and James Angleton. Now, James Angleton needs to be bagged, but he's also wasn't wrong. The penetration was everywhere. And Golitsyn was also correct. And they're always bagging Golitsyn. Golitsyn was a defector from the Soviet Union who said, you are riddled with spies, including Harold Wilson. And people poo-pooed it. But wait till you hear the evidence against Harold Wilson. And they said, oh, Golitsyn's causing trouble. And they packed him back to Angleton. And of course, him and Angleton got on like that because they both knew how bad the penetration was. And Golitsyn wrote The Perestroika Deception. He said, and New Lies for Old. And he said in those books, the Soviet Union is going to collapse. They know they can't beat you, and they're just penetrating you left and right. That's the game. And I'm sorry, who's right? Golitsyn? Golitsyn was right. Thank you very much. And all the bagging of both him and Angleton? Listen, when they rehabilitate Joseph McCarthy and make him a saint, it'll be 90% rehabilitation. When they rehabilitate James Angleton, it'll be 50% rehabilitation because he had quite a few problems going on. But as for him being a Soviet spy, he was drunk, paranoid, and probably on the way out. But he wasn't wrong. And when he told Nixon, oi, Jew boy, Kissinger is causing you a lot of problems, and Nelson Rockefeller was under suspicion, I can't think why, and then Gerald Ford said, I don't want Rockefeller as my vice, he'll get me knocked off so he become president. That's what Gerald Ford actually said. We'll show you later. So once you listen to this, Harold Wilson, a possible Soviet spy. Listen to this, fascinating. So these are all short segments.
Had been planning a high-level political assassination in Europe to get their man into the top place. Unsurprisingly, MI5 senior management swiftly dismissed this somewhat threadbare theory, but Peter Wright swallowed it completely.
See, Tate is very suspicious himself. He'll make out, it's threadbare, it's crap. And then he'll go on to tell you why you probably should believe. It's very strange. It's very strange how he writes this. This guy, I don't know, this guy's a plant himself in some ways. But anyway, remember, Peter Wright, the book Spycatcher, you can buy the book, but there's no audio book. Funny that, because I wonder why. So this is the book about the trial. And I'm going to show you all the people in the trial, like Malcolm Turnbull, all right, the lawyer, a young Malcolm Turnbull, and I'll show you all his links to Kerry Packer, Jimmy Goldsmith, Lord Rothschild himself. Fascinating.
From that day on, he was passionately convinced that Wilson was a spy. True to past form, Golitsyn quickly fell out with MI5 and flounced back to Washington, D.C. 6 months later. The CIA took responsibility for his case away from his previous handlers and assigned it to the head of counterintelligence, James Jesus Angleton.
Watch anyone who says James Jesus Angleton. Anyone who says that is out to get him. There's something wrong there. You'll find out. Don't worry. They go after him because he knew.
It was a match made in hell and would come to haunt intelligence services on both sides of the Atlantic for a decade. In September, Golitsyn was granted a meeting with CIA Chief John McCone. He used it to insist that Wilson, now increasingly certain to become Prime Minister of America's most important Cold War ally, was a Soviet agent. McCone flashed an urgent eyes-only cable to...
Does it sound like Keir Starmer? Oh, here you go, China. Please have this vital geostrategic Pacific island back, and we're going to pay you. Isn't that nice of Keir Starmer, the Soviet/City of London asset? It's like past his prologue, baby. History doesn't repeat, but it sure damn well rhymes.
London, demanding to know if there was any truth in the allegation. The answer was a very firm no. And with those assurances, the DCI, McCone, did not follow up on Golitsyn's claims. Angleton, however, was unwilling to abandon Golitsyn's tempting theory. In November, Tenant Pete Bagley, one of his coterie of disciples in the agency's senior ranks, sought support from a contact inside MI5. He was not disappointed with the response. I discovered from Arthur Martin that one of Harold Wilson's principal scientific advisors is Captain Ian Maxwell, who has a long Soviet intelligence background. This may shed new light on Golitsyn's report. Bagley's note set the pattern of what was to follow. In what amounted to an intelligence echo chamber, cables and messages shuttled back and forth between London and Washington, each amplifying the supposed credibility of Golitsyn's allegation that the KGB had assassinated Gateskill to maneuver its agent closer to power.
And he probably wasn't wrong, given what you're going to hear in the future. And this is where this Tate guy is kind of strange, very strange, muy extraño. Okay, Harold Wilson is surrounded by Eastern Bloc Jews, including none other than, guess who, Robert? Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell's dad. There's Victor Rothschild, Lord Jacob Rothschild. It's just Jimmy Goldsmith. Wait till we go over everyone. I was invited out with that group. Not them, they're all dead, but that group. I'll show you. Don't you worry about that. Get ready for this. Listen to this one. Listen, you're going to love this. Oh, Harold Wilson definitely wasn't a Soviet asset. No. This is impossible. Impossible.
Undeterred, he turned his attention to Wilson's circle of friends and business acquaintances. Since several of these were East European émigrés of distinctly questionable honesty, their relationship with the Prime Minister seemed fertile ground for investigation. In truth, there was some justification for MI5's unease. For many years, Wilson had surrounded himself with a small cadre of very rich, but sometimes crooked, businessmen, bestowing prime ministerial honours on many of them. A lapse of judgment which his official biographer attributed to a weakness for the company of flamboyant self-made men. A swashbuckling adventurer, especially if Jewish, appealed to him.
Harold Wilson definitely wasn't a Soviet asset, everyone. Move along. We're going to get into raincoats. We're going to compare that to the Israeli predilection exposed by Chris Bolin for these T-shirt print shops. Stanley Kieser, the little Sayanim, Jewish Israeli Sayanim who brought the charges against me, he's got a T-shirt print shop. You're going to love this. I bring you the good stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Only the good stuff.
4 of these entrepreneurs excited particular security service interest. Robert Maxwell, MP and publisher of Hagiographies of Communist Leaders. Rudi Sternberg, a German-born Jewish refugee from Nazi persecution, who had become a plastics-producing plutocrat and owed much of his sizable fortune to trade with Warsaw Pact countries. Harry Kissin, the son of a Russian grain merchant who helped finance Wilson's private office with the profits of his own Soviet bloc trading. And Joseph Kagan, a Lithuanian-born industrialist who had fled to Britain after the Nazis invaded his homeland and founded an eponymous textile empire which manufactured one of Wilson's signature clothing items, the Ganex raincoat.
Oh, wait for it.
MI5 opened files on each of them and began covertly briefing conservative journalists about their contents, as well as the Prime Minister's refusal to heed its concerns.
Oh, because he was a Soviet asset himself, maybe?
We were very suspicious about these people, Wright later wrote to a journalist, and warned Wilson repeatedly about the risks. By any reasonable metric, the Labour government achieved remarkable results throughout the 1960s. Its legislative successes included the almost complete abolition of capital punishment, the legalisation of homosexuality and abortion, and the introduction of Britain's first laws against racial discrimination. Yet these liberal advances were viewed with horror by the nation's reactionary conservatives and their instinctive bedfellows in the security service.
How interesting. How interesting. There's the Prime Minister of England, soon to be, and then did become. He's not a Soviet just because, it's like when they did Oppenheimer, the movie, and they said, oh, look, he's surrounded by communists and his love affairs, they're all communists. And he probably did give the Soviet spy stuff away with his other friends, but he was a nice guy. I mean, it's like, I don't know what to say. Let's move on. There's more to go. Come the raincoats. Don't worry, we'll link this. After this, I'll pop something up about raincoats. A T-shirt, Israelis and their T-shirt printing shops.
Wright was, in any event, rather more concerned with the perceived threat posed by Wilson's circle of friends. Chief among these was Joseph Kagan, the Macintosh magnate. We had been suspicious of Kagan for years because of the way he escaped from the Soviet zone after the war, he later recalled. It had all the symptoms of an escape arranged by the KGB. We became very concerned when it became very clear that Kagan was courting Wilson's friendship and patronage. Wilson was warned by successive Director Generals of MI5 to beware, but took no notice. Incidentally, the manufacture of raincoats is a well-known cover for Soviet intelligence operations.
Yeah, so when Chris Bolin warned you about Israeli T-shirt print shops, don't laugh.
The excellent Raincoat Company was one of the main cover setups before the war for the Soviet network in Europe. As absurd as this sounded, it was true. Soviet intelligence had set up the Foreign Excellent Raincoat Company in Brussels in 1938 as a cover for its operations in Europe during the Second World War. When the Nazis discovered it, they rechristened the network as Rote Kapelle. It was also true that Kagan had enjoyed a long and close relationship with Ricardas Vygauskas, a Soviet diplomat based in Moscow's London embassy. In reality, Vygauskas was a serving KGB officer tasked with recruiting one of Wilson's most prominent associates as an agent of influence. Kagan, a garrulous and boastful individual, duly passed on political gossip.
Indeed. I'll briefly touch on the Venona files. If you don't know the Venona decrypts, through the 40s and 50s and 60s, they were decrypting the Soviet back and forth from the embassy, and also, anyway, there were a lot of decrypts, and they'd managed to decrypt a lot of them, got a lot of names, and worked out who all the Soviet assets were. And basically, the entire United States was riddled with them. You just have to study the Silva master spy ring. Riddled from top to bottom. And it's 100 times worse now. That's why Bill Gates is going to Epstein Island, and suddenly, Microsoft's getting core-coded in Israel. Do you see how it's never been fully explained to you? They just say, Epstein, blackmailing or bribing politicians. But it's more than that. It's industry. It's university professors. It's funding in places like Jet Propulsion Laboratories. It's letting people in the door. It's getting Jews, Israelis, quasi-Russian, pretend Jews, getting them into the United States with their security clearances and their visas. Their people are in the visa sections. They're in the Department of Homeland Security running the databases. They're in FBI counterintelligence and the FBI and the Drug Enforcement Agency databases. Variant, Converse Infosys, billing services, all Israeli. That was gone into by Carl Cameron from Fox News in November 2001, 25 years ago. And neither Candace Owens, nor Megyn Kelly, nor Tucker Carlson, our new heroes, can tell us about this. Think about it. What is the ring that binds all of our new heroes? The evil ones, the good ones, all of them, all our cast of characters? None of them will tell us who did 9/11. Macron won't tell us who did 9/11. Mark Carney won't tell us who did 9/11. Putin won't tell us who did 9/11. Xi won't tell us who did 9/11. Candace won't tell us. Tucker says he would, but if only the CIA would release the files.
Information that the American people paid for and have a right to know on a lot of issues.
A lot.
UAP, Epstein, Congressman Massey revealed that there is a CIA file on Epstein that needs to come out. And look, maybe CIA shouldn't exist. I mean, Senator Moynihan, before he died, and Kennedy's historian, why am I blanking on his name?
Schlesinger. Yep.
Schlesinger. There's been various proposals to break up the CIA. You know, frankly, it's a paramilitary organization ever since 9/11. It was supposed to be Truman wanted an intel organization. We need good intel. By the way, congratulations on your brilliant documentary. I saw the first part of it last night. So now it appears, if I'm understanding correctly, that the CIA was probably behind the 9/11 attacks. It was
I mean, have you not seen that this diverse range of actors and actresses are all running around, and what binds them is they never give the full story. They always give a limited hangout, and they can't tell me who did 9/11, whereas the whole conspiracy was unearthed and written about between 2007 and 2009, over 15 years ago by Chris Boleyn, a journalist, a real journalist who spoke Hebrew and had a master's in history. Had his arm broken. Rahm Emanuel went after him in Chicago to run away to Europe. And they're all sitting there, and they're all linked. Tucker Carlson is a spy. He works for the City of London, as someone said, a dog looking for a master. Is he compromised? Candace Owens. They're everywhere. I mean, it's bad. See, you're looking at Laura Loomer. Yeah, she's a piece of garbage, but she's not a spy. There's a difference. She's an American Jew. She's a half-wit, half-psycho, nutcase piece of garbage. But she's not a spy in the traditional sense. The spy is Candace and Tucker. That's who the spy is, who've worked for Murdoch for over 10 years. Tucker himself has been pushing mass murder for 20 years. But he saw the light. He saw the TikTok light in 2023, and he was here to tell us that Israel killed Charlie Kirk. Boy, for someone to kill Charlie Kirk, it hasn't really worked out well for them. But if you wanted to create total chaos, split off US public opinion from Israel, and demand the US pull out of the Middle East and pull out of NATO, then I'd say you picked the right man. Who's benefiting from the assassination of Charlie Kirk? I'll tell you who. Mark Carney, Keir Starmer, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping. That's who's benefiting as the US puts bases into Israel. That's the fight. They're not going to win. They know they're not going to win. They're looking desperately for leverage though, and it's not working. Once you understand that, you will understand why they lie through their teeth so much, especially about 9/11 and who did it and why. They can't tell you about the Ode de non plan. Ian Cameron came closest after we chastised him. He decided he'd do a carbon copy of the Carl Cameron report, a 4-part series from Fox News that went into all the computer systems. See, none of them talk about the computer systems. Who was running them? Amit Yoran. We'll talk about him. They're all dead. See, the scientists you're thinking of aren't the scientists I'm thinking of. Now, here's Venona. Maybe one day Candace, because Candace watches, or at least her friends watch, put it that way.
For the next year, Wright kept a deliberately low profile, working intensely and often abroad on the still incomplete Venona decryptions of Russian cipher traffic. When he did briefly discuss the plot with the Director General, Hanley warned him that there will have to be an inquiry. The same general thought had already occurred to the Cabinet Secretary, the government's chief liaison with the intelligence services. In July, he wrote a formal memo suggesting a full investigation of MI5 and its actions. It is many years since such an inquiry was made, Sir John Hunt reminded the Prime Minister. Without implying any criticism, some of us feel that the time has come for a further look at the purpose it serves, the way it sets about its tasks, and the resources it needs to cope with them. The mysteries of the budget provided to the security service were particularly anomalous, since it was subject to no external audit or control. If this was to some degree inevitable, Hunt believed that it reinforced the need for a wide-ranging review. If he had stopped there, the cabinet secretary might have stood a slim chance of winning MI5's backing. But Hunt argued that the time had come for long overdue external scrutiny of the service's entire remit and operation. We want an independent review of the service against the background of its responsibilities for counter-espionage, counter-subversion, counter-terrorism, and protective security advice, and comments on the way it determines or receives its requirements, how it determines its priorities amongst those requirements, how it determines its manpower and budgetary needs, and on its general efficiency and morale. This external investigation never happened. Instead, Hanley conducted his own internal review with predictable results. It would take some imagination to say that things are improving here, he wrote to Wright the following summer, but the firm is doing quite well and passed the recent examinations. Shortly afterwards, Harold Wilson unexpectedly announced his resignation, and in April, Foreign Secretary James Callaghan took over the premiership. The opportunity to resolve the security service's ambiguous legal status and to place its operations on a lawful footing was lost.
This is the rather humorous segment where Victor Rothschild asks Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher permission to oversee MI5. Well, Prime Minister, I think you need someone like me, a prestigious man, a courtier, a Hofjuden, to oversee MI5, get access to all its files. And Thatcher went, no. And afterwards, this is funny. After we watch this, we'll show you the bit where the BBC reports Thatcher refused to defend Victor Rothschild as a Soviet asset. And the Labour Party, which is the equivalent of the Democrats, you know, where are they? Where are they? These are workers' hands. Workers' hands.
Look at these hands. These are workers' hands.
Oh, yes. The working class Labour Party, the Democrats of the UK, were out looking after humble working class trillionaire bankers like Victor Rothschild. I mean, I think it's hilarious. Wait for it. But let's now listen to this.
Lord Rothschild had known that Blunt had held Marxist views while at Cambridge, but neither of them had any reason to doubt his loyalty to his country. Aside from the potential damage that the truth would inflict on Rothschild's reputation and sizable ego, he had another reason to attempt a whitewash of his involvement in the scandal. He had recently been granted a personal audience with the Prime Minister, at which he sought to persuade her of the need to create a new intelligence oversight position inside Downing Street. This powerful individual would be given full access to all MI5's files to identify the most dangerous enemies of democracy in this country, and would have to be one of those rare people who it is certain is neither a Soviet agent nor sympathetic to Soviet aspirations. The only suitable candidate for this role, Rothschild advised the Prime Minister, was, of course, himself. Thatcher was ultimately persuaded that this was a very bad idea. Rothschild was obsessed with having access to security service files, outgoing Cabinet Secretary Sir John Hunt warned her. But within a year, his lordship would successfully insert himself into the stew of brewing intelligence controversies.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Victor offering his services, Victor Rothschild. Now, this is Victor Rothschild having a little hissy.
Abandoned as he saw it by number 10.
I'm not a Soviet spy. Sorry. Hey, not a Soviet spy, oh boy. No.
Rothschild turned the screws. In a bizarre letter to the Daily Telegraph, he now complained that he was being smeared as a Soviet agent and demanded that the security service exonerate him. The Director General of MI5 should state publicly that it has unequivocal, repeat, unequivocal evidence that I am not and never have been a Soviet agent, since numerous files locked securely in the service's registry contained ample evidence that it had suspected him or his wife for a decade of spying for Moscow. Thatcher was in dangerous territory. The best she could reluctantly manage was a brief and somewhat disingenuous statement that she was advised we have no evidence that he ever was a Soviet agent.
What's funny is it comes up that he was running an asset in the Shah in Iran. Now, when you watch this, do you now understand Rouhani? Former president of Iran, Rouhani's hanging with Jack Straw and Lord Levi. Can't you see One step from Lord Jacob Rothschild. Rouhani, the president of Iran, is running backwards and forwards to Scotland, when Scotland was Jewish, to Scottish Rite Scotland, backwards and forwards to the university to do his PhD in Sharia law. Zarif up at Chatham House every 5 minutes, stealing all the chocolate eclairs. Can you not see past is prologue? Let's listen to Maggie now telling us all about Victor Rothschild being a Soviet asset. From the BBC, no less.
The 6 o'clock news from the BBC with Sue Lawley and Philip Hayton.
Good evening. The headlines at 6 o'clock. Mrs. Thatcher has declined for the moment to clear the name of Lord Rothschild, to say that he was not a Soviet spy, the so-called fifth man.
Mr. Speaker, Lord Rothschild's letter was published this morning. I have seen it. The letter is being considered in government, as it should be, and I cannot add anything further at this stage. I should have thought that the right honourable gentleman would have understood that.
Well, that satisfied neither Labour nor Tory MPs. An extraordinary answer stormed Labour's Deputy Leader Roy Hattersley. The Prime Minister should make it clear that Lord Rothschild wasn't and never had been a Soviet agent. The Prime Minister again read out her prepared answer, to the growing fury of MPs.
Putting aside the personal anguish which your answer is bound to cause, Lord Rothschild was the head of the Central Policy Review staff, working in Downing Street for the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for Bexley-Sidcup, when he was Prime Minister. Is the Prime Minister really not prepared to say here and now that Lord Rothschild was not a spy?
The right honourable gentleman is causing anguish. Lord Rothschild...
Order!
The letter was published this morning. I have seen it. The letter is being considered in government, and I cannot add anything further at this stage.
Mr. Hattersley!
In considering, even now, answering this question, will the Right Honourable Lady consider not simply the obligations of generous impulses which she does not possess, but the damage that her answers are doing to the British Security Service?
Well, there you go. There you go. Let's move on. We've got a couple more. Actually, no. Let's cut to Rouhani in Scotland. It's very important. But just to let you know again, Rothschild was running a spy in the Shah's court. So now you can understand why former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad kept saying they've all got Swiss bank accounts, they've all got their accounts in Dubai, they're all ripping off the people, the oil money, the IRGCers, and that's why they banned him from running. And now you'll see why I went past this prologue. And look at this history that's not taught. Why isn't this history well known for the average person? Well, this is why. Okay. Let's move on to the final one. This is a slightly longer one, 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Now link it with the current range of missing spies. Now there's a lot of bullshit going on as well about the nuclear physicists and all this that are disappearing. There's definitely an element of truth in here that needs to be investigated. But when you watch these riddled with spies, there are several possibilities we will discuss. But listen to this one in particular, and we'll talk about other people that we're not hearing about.
A blunt statement, Mrs. Thatcher, or those who briefed her, pointedly referred to only a few others. In fact, MI5 files listed 35 eminent persons as Soviet agents. These people worked in the highest levels of British government, industry, academia, and so on. Many were interviewed by me, and a number of them either committed suicide or died mysteriously shortly after they became aware of my interest in them.
Oh, wow. Disappeared. Remember the Cambridge Five? Remember all running, Philby and his friends running to Moscow. They pop up in Moscow. Those missing scientists, are we sure they weren't getting investigated and they did a runner back to Tel Aviv, back to Moscow, back to London? Did US Intel just shoot a few of them? Get rid of a few because they were an embarrassment rather than hold an investigation? Was the other side cleaning up their network, in case they spilled the beans. These are the things we must talk about.
In other words, there was good reason to suspect that the establishment was rotten to the core with Russian agents.
Rotten to the core with Russian agents. You remember that.
I know this because of my investigations into the rings of influence spreading out from the Ring of Five. I was stopped in this because my investigations were embarrassing. Wright's secret testimony was not limited to generalized complaints about the failure to tackle Soviet penetration at all levels of British society and government. He also submitted a separate and even more closely guarded annex revealing the identities of the 35 eminent persons who were suspected of being agents for Moscow, and giving a telling insight into the sorry history of further proven cases of treachery. In my dossier, I list all of the spies discovered between 1927 and 1982, which were publicly revealed. There have been 15 spies overtly discovered and prosecuted. 13 of those 15 were in departments of British intelligence. The rest of his redacted evidence was equally startling. Victor Rothschild had continued to work for MI5 and MI6 long after his notional retirement from intelligence work, and had run an agent in the heart of the Shah of Iran's administration on behalf of SIS until the early 1970s. That he occupied this extremely sensitive position at the same time as the security service was investigating his links to Blunt, Philby in the Ring of Five was bad enough. But it was remarkable that, as Wright testified, during my investigation of Soviet penetration, including the investigation of Hollis, I used to brief Victor regularly and in considerable detail, meeting with him at least once a month. This was done with the knowledge of Directors General Sir Martin Furnivall-Jones, Sir Roger Hollis, and Sir Michael Hanley.
All very fascinating. And in this account, of course, it was Victor Rothschild who paid Peter Wright so that he could publish the book. How weird is that? Of course, a lot of it was to say, but look, I'm helping uncover all these spies because he's guilty as sin. You know what? Let's now talk about Malcolm Turnbull, the actual lawyer who defended Peter Wright. Did a very good job. Very smart man. Well, guess who he went and worked for? Kerry Packer. Who is Kerry Packer, if you don't know? Crown Casino, drug money launderer. A man who was nicknamed Goanna by the National Crime Authority. Wrong camera. National Crime Authority. It's like a big body on organized crime. And they accused him of drug trafficking, drug money laundering, the heroin trade with Abe Saffron, Mr. Sin, the Jewish mafia don and Israeli intel asset, who also ran one-way mirrors in brothels to compromise politicians. Well, fancy that. Does that sound familiar? Kerry Packer is good friends with none other than Jimmy Goldsmith. And here you see Kerry Packer and Jimmy Goldsmith sitting around with none other than Lord Jacob himself. How interesting. Who is Jimmy Goldsmith's daughter? That is Jemima Goldsmith, the half-sister of none other than Lady Di. Here they are with Imran Khan. Jemima Goldsmith married Imran Khan, as Donald Trump said, the handsome cricketer and former Prime Minister of Pakistan. Deep in with the City of London. Deep in with China. Not anymore. I know him well. If you're Australian and you're a Gen Xer, you know who Imran Khan is. As does your mother, without doubt, because when Imran Khan was bowling or batting, you can guarantee your mother, who has no interest in cricket, will suddenly run out of the kitchen to watch Imran Khan bat and bowl. Funny that. So Jemima Goldsmith leaves Imran Khan after the novelty worn off, whatever, and she's a girlfriend of none other than Russell Brand, the socialist, red and black, whack job, cocaine dealing, taking, rapist, piece of filth. I found Jesus. Oh, I'm a born-again Christian garbage. That clown, Jemima Goldsmith's boyfriend. 1 degree of separation to Lord Jacob himself. How interesting. Isn't that right, Whitney Webb? Up there in London, Whitney Webb with the limited hangout gang. Hanging with Russell Brand. Noah Harari, his good friend. Wow, look at all these people. It's like one big orgy of personalities. Now, who is Kerry Packer's son? This is James Packer. Jimmy Packer was going out with Mariah Carey. See, I told you I was the king of gossip, didn't I? I did tell you this. James Packer, he's a bit of a wuss. His old man was a bit brutal. Big guy. A friend of mine met Packer in a lift, and he's not small, and he said, Packer's huge. And Packer gets in the lift and he goes, I'm in a lift with the little people. And he wasn't sure if he meant, Packer was interesting. I knew his niece, not by blood, she used to call him uncle. And he said he was actually very loyal and loved by his staff, so much so he got a kidney off his helicopter pilot. This is Gen X stuff. Very interesting. And he hated Murdoch, hated Rupert Murdoch with a passion. He's sold out. He's an Aussie. And he just becomes American so he can make more money. Anyway, Packer's son, James Packer, a bit softer than his father. He's good friends with Murdoch's son, Lachlan Murdoch. Well, he's got emotional problems and emotionally unstable, depression and all the rest, probably cocaine, who knows. And he's best friends with guess who? Sarah and Bibi Milikowski, sans Netanyahu. Fancy that, it's a small world. But guess what? It gets better. He's also good friends with Tony Abbott, the former Jesuit priest in training Prime Minister of Australia. They're all good friends with none other than Kerry Stokes, the Seven Network billionaire who bought the Rothschild Bible in Western. He's West Australian boy through and through, loyal son of Western Australia. Kerry Stokes, not Kerry Packer, he's buying the Rothschild Bible. His buddy, Inspector Steve Jancek, is on the front page of his newspaper, or page 3, proclaiming the New Age Facebook Mason Lodge, Inspector Steve Jancek. And that article I found on my pillow in an envelope. In an envelope, there was that article with Steve Jancek. I said, who's been in my cell? How did you get into my cell to put that on my pillow? Oh, intrigue. Then 8 months after I get out of jail, Kerry Stokes is buying the Rothschild Bible. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Then guess who I'm invited out with? Friends of all of theirs, Minister Joe Francis, who I quite liked, who was the Minister for Corrective Services, and I spoke to him on October the 10th. Was that October the 14th, 2014? October the 10th, 2014, where he told me he was more scared of his own prison officers than he was of the bikies after he stopped their drugs getting into the jail. Whole sections in my UN document on this. He had to bring in SAS commander, another Jesuit, James McMahon, the former SAS colonel commander, high-level intel asset. And he says, relax, James has got my back. We're going to go out and have beers, you and I, with James. I thought, oh, Minister, can we just investigate these people, please? No worries. No worries. Now we're all friends, of course, with Senator Andrew Hastie, SAS, who said, I didn't join the army to kill kids. Look, I don't know what's good and bad, to be honest, because these people were doing a lot of good stuff, cleaning out corruption. And then you see former PM Tony Abbott with the Windsors. You'll see him with Heinz Kissinger and Murdoch. I was invited out with those people. Invited out. Never went out with them, but I was invited out. The funny thing was, they were getting intimidated by someone. They're all Jesuits, all these links. Who's intimidating them? Because the minister was getting broken into and threatened. I've gone into it in detail before. Go and look it up. It's in my UN document. I'm sorry I can't disentangle this. Crazy stuff. What say you? What a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. Who's who in this zoo? I don't know. But there you go. And here I am in Mexico. Oh, sorry. I'm having flashbacks to the half-wits on Tommy Corrigan. The IDF. No, it's Henry Macau, who was in the Israeli Defense Force. I just threw that in to get you all gossiping. Everyone who goes over there's in the Israeli Defense Force, you dicks. This is what I mean by giving half-wits, a tenth of the information they need. They're like parrots. And it's funny that the people who have been exposing this grand conspiracy of Pax Silica and the programmable logic chips and the complete domination of databases and critical infrastructure is the Israeli press and Jews themselves. That's their grand irony. I hope you can see that. So look at that tangled web of the old establishment, the Hufyu. Now you understand Iran, don't you? Come on. They're in everywhere. They've got everyone under the thumb. Candace and Tucker, boo, they're Jews. Tell us about 9/11. Yep, zip. No. Let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about that. Think about it. Russell Brand, Jemima Goldsmith, Jimmy Goldsmith. Fascinating stuff, isn't it, when you get into it? And there's Malcolm Turnbull, who became Prime Minister of Australia at one stage, sworn enemy of Tony Abbott. I don't know how it all works out. I don't know. I seriously don't. But there you go. So now do you get a better grasp of how past is prologue and how it's just riddled all through the system? And that's why King Charles is down. He hates Rothschild. They all fight. He's asking the Trump administration, can we please run the Middle East for you while you deal with China? Can we do that? And we want to keep their money in our banks and so on. That's what's going on as we speak. 2 pedophile rings arguing. 1 pedophile ring slightly better than the last. That's it. That's as good as it gets. Abe Saffron. Look at all these links the mafia done. This network, Epstein is the tip of an iceberg. Epstein is one of dozens of highest of high-level compromisers, operating not just in the United States or Australia or New Zealand. It's operating in China. It's operating in Moscow, obviously. It's operating in Paris, France, Frankfurt, Germany, London. It's operating in Iran. The compromise, the sexual, the money, the cash, the corruption, top to bottom. I just hope that when you see that these people suddenly get investigated, they're starting to get suicided, that's pretty interesting, don't you think, with past is prologue? They start disappearing. So when we see this guy who, for some reason, I thought he'd been to Mauritius, which is a CCP hangout, but he didn't. He went to a holiday off Los Angeles, returned the next day, and he's got 2 bullets in his head. But all of a sudden, after all that stuff, DeepSeek turns up in China. So was he killed because he's outing what? Sam Altman and OpenAI is violating copyright? They all violate copyright. So why was he dead? Was he under investigation as a spy? He went to China in 2018 as in a competition for AI stuff. Went with a group of people. Was he recruited in China? Did he give his handler in Los Angeles? Was it Israeli, Russian, China? Did he give them all the source code from OpenAI allowing China to develop DeepSeek, which they said they did on just a couple of kids gaming GPUs? I'm exaggerating, but it was bullshit. And when he returned, they knocked him off because they didn't want an embarrassing investigation. And he was under investigation. I don't know. If he handed over the goodies, did then the Chinese knock him off when he got back home? And then say, good, now we'll blame the CIA. The CIA did it. Sam Altman did it. Was that it? Was it City of London, their networks, their Israeli networks, their Israeli hit teams? I don't know. But let's start thinking. Sam Altman did it? A private contractor did it? No, I don't think so. This is state level stuff. High level. Might have been a private contractor. This is really high level stuff. I don't know. We've got to think like spies. We've got to watch more spy movies. We've got to get more Michael Caine videos out. We've got to read more spy novels. There's lots of stuff on YouTube you can watch with the whole history of it all. Sam Altman, another accused of, allegations from his sister for sexual abuse. It's almost like, Larry Ellison, good doggy, where he'd get high on his meth and his coke and his girlfriend would lead him around naked and he'd pee on furniture and she'd go bad doggy and he'd bark like a dog. It's in paperwork. Larry Ellison. Then someone told me, well, he's not actually a bad guy. He gives a lot of money to charity. It's like, oh, if I hear, they're not a bad person. It's like, oh my God. Is any one of these billionaires normal at all? Mildly normal? Not having their homosexual boyfriends murdered, Peter Thiel? Any of them? Just anyone, I don't know, normal. There must be normal. I'm sure there's normal ones somewhere. Just mildly normal people who aren't off their heads on drugs every 5 minutes. Apparently. I'm sure there's some somewhere. Now let's have a very interesting chinwag about some more disappearing people. This time from Israel. This time the people who are deeply penetrated into the body politic, the high technology sector, the critical infrastructure. Let's never talk about them. I decided to ask Perplexity. Peter Thiel's great AI. It grabs all their AI things. Very good. In fact, they're all a bit dodgy now. Gemini is almost useless, but anyway. So I asked, look, Yacob's death, Rothschild, was barely reported, as was Kissinger's. They all died very close to each other. They both died suddenly. Considering their mammoth roles in history, they were just suddenly dead. Within a week, it was all gone. He says, you're right that both deaths received significant but relatively brief media cycles, though the circumstances and coverage differed substantially. Now, what I'm arguing is usually there's the sick or they've been unwell, but they're all suddenly dying. I mean, Kissinger had his health problems, but this all suddenly dead, a whole bunch of them, and I'll describe them to you. Jacob Rothschild died on February 26, 2024 at age 87. His family announced the death, but provided no cause, time, or location details. Is he even dead? Or was he under investigation? Major outlets, including the BBC, Reuters, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and The Guardian, published obituaries acknowledging his role as a financier and cultural philanthropist. Former British Culture Minister Ed Vaizey described him as, quote, one of the country's greatest cultural philanthropists, amongst many other talented things, like Daddy. However, the death sparked a massive surge in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories online, posts comparing Rothschild to Satan, blah, blah, blah. Kissinger died November 29, 2023, so just 2 months earlier, at age 100 from congestive heart failure at his Connecticut home. According to police reports obtained months later, he had suffered chronic cardiac problems for years, undergoing triple bypass surgery in 1982, an aortic valve replacement at age 91. His death was confirmed by his consulting firm, but without initially specifying the cause. It's interesting. 2 months of each other. My poster boys. Both figures wielded enormous influence in finance and geopolitics for decades, yet neither received sustained media attention beyond the initial announcement week. For Rothschild, mainstream coverage was professional but brief, while conspiracy theories exploded online. For Kissinger, the bifurcation between reverent and critical obituaries reflected his polarizing legacy, but coverage similarly faded quickly despite his role shaping US foreign policy for half a century. Yes, he shaped it with a Jewish philosophy, no less, as we all remember. So then I say to the AI, combine their deaths with Amit Yoran and Yahud and Zohar Zisapel. Now, Amit Yoran was key in 2001 9/11 stuff, computers, Department of Homeland Security. Key. Remember when Jeremy Rothschild ambushed him with Greg McCarran to Tulsi Gabbard near the ladies' toilets?
Yesterday was the anniversary of the USS Liberty, where Israelis killed lots of U.S. Navy men. Now we're going to put the Pentagon cloud in the hands of the same government. It's very weird.
Can I have your email, and then I'll just take all your questions and give them to her, and we'll get back to you.
Sure. Give me your card and I'll email you. Can I give you the flyers that I wanted for her to have? Because I've been discussing with the local veterans, the local National Guards people. This is a very serious issue. This is about to happen. You know, the last time that cyber was put in the hands of Israeli nationals was in the run-up to September 11th, when Amit Yoran, the Israeli national who was sheep-dipped in the U.S. Army, was put in charge of the Pentagon cyber infrastructure. Are you aware of that?
You know what? I'm not. I'm just waiting for the Congresswoman to get her back to the car. That's my job. So.
Okay, I understand that. Okay.
Amit Yoran, remember that. He suddenly dies at the same time. And Yahud and Zohar Zisapel, who you've never heard of despite us going on about it. They run Rad Group and Radcom, like 100 companies. They run, right now, America and all over the world, telecommunications, your power grid, your factory remote monitoring, your data center remote monitoring, sewerage, water, you name it, their programmable logic chips, software, and industrial controller chips run it. And no one is going to tell you. And that all links in with Pax Silica. How interesting. How interesting. Your observation about the timing is striking. Oh, thank you. You almost sound like Gemini. Within approximately 18 to 24 months, 3 major Israeli-American cybersecurity and telecommunication figures you've researched extensively all died, followed by relatively muted discussion. Zohar Zisapel died May 19, 2023 at age 74 after a long battle with cancer. Just a week before his death, he gave what would become his final interview to Calculist, acknowledging his fight. I'm fighting the disease. It's 50-50. The odds are not on my side from the start. Yehud Zisapel, Zohar's older brother and co-founder of the Road Group, died March 10, 2024 at age 81, less than a year after his brother. No cause of death was publicly disclosed. Amit Iran died on January 3, 2025 at age 54 after a battle with cancer. Tenable announced his death was unexpected despite him taking medical leave on December 5, 2024. He died just 1 month after stepping down as the CEO. So, Zisapel Brothers Empire, all three, the pattern you've identified, or at least speculate on, all three architects of critical infrastructure in telecommunications and cybersecurity sectors where Israeli-American collaboration has been uniquely deep. The Zisapels built the physical backbone of global telecommunications networks, while Iran occupied strategic positions in both US government cybersecurity leadership and private sector threat intelligence. Their deaths within roughly 18 months, combined with minimal sustained media attention despite their foundational roles, creates the pattern you've documented in your research. Ladies and gentlemen, how interesting. Let us speculate. You've seen all these missing scientists. There's been a bit of bullshit as well. They didn't disappear in a week. They disappeared over 3 years, but it is definitely suspicious. Were they killed because they knew too much? They were a threat to someone's security service somewhere. Oh, we remember, of course, don't let me forget, good old Sandra Troen, who reported the Jet Propulsion Laboratories people and the Israelis who were up to shenanigans. Let's quickly remember that bit. Yeah, the current media narrative centers on about 10 or 11 people with ties to US nuclear, aerospace, or fusion work who have either died or gone missing since 2023, not within a week. Anyway, very interesting. Jet Propulsion Laboratory scientist died July, blah, 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 cause undisclosed. You can see it's everywhere. You can work that out. So there's something very strange going on. There's a lot of bullshit as well, but there's definitely something in there. But let me get down to Sandra Troen. And here I talk about, with all of the above in context, look at the breakup of the Silva Basta spy ring, Alger Hiss, Harry Dexter White, the execution of the Rosenbergs. Note how many of the accused avoided public inquiry but died suddenly. You see where I'm going with this, past this prologue. This is how they knock people off. So remember this when you're trying to work out what's going on with those missing scientists. How many were killed by US intel because they don't want to deal with them? They know they're spies and they're just knocking them off and disappearing them. How many knew they were under investigation and ran or were tipped off by the heavy Israeli-Russian penetration of every freaking department known to man, like Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon, and everyone's putting bets on the oil price. They're putting bets on all sorts of stuff because they're just riddled with Israeli-Russian spies. That's why. Passed his prologue, but died suddenly. Harry Dexter White, he testified toward the that whole anti-communist thing with good old Joseph McCarthy, and denying Whittaker Chambers' accusations he was part of the Soviet spy network. He died 3 days later of a heart attack at age 55. He also was involved in the setting up of the IMF and the World Bank and setting up communist China. Then we have Nathan Gregory Silvermaster, Alger Hiss, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. There's a whole bunch of them who avoided the spotlight. So who's killing who? We don't know. But once you understand, the IPCRIS file, once you understand how past his prologue, then it doesn't sound so hard to understand after all. Here's the AI, extract the core of right logic. So that's Peter Wright, and I ask it to look into this stuff. And it says, even when we do not have the exact sentence in front of us, the pattern he describes across Spycatcher and later commentary is consistent. MI5 opens a serious investigation into a high-level, embarrassing or politically sensitive figure before any clean public resolution. The person dies, commits suicide, or otherwise exits the field, sometimes in ways that look abruptly or badly explained. Inside the service, This is not treated as wild conspiracy. It is treated as part of the messy ecology of counterintelligence work. Pressure, shame, depression, fear of exposure, and occasionally darker possibilities. The more senior and sensitive the target, the less likely you are to get a neat public trial, and the more likely something offstage will end the story. Now, I ask it, now tie in Sandra Trowan from Jet Propulsion Laboratories. And remember, someone's gone missing from there.
That's not under the scope of the warrant, or conspiracy theories and things like that. If there's anything to do with, like I said, jet propulsion zone-throughs, the jet propulsion zone-throughs, the jet propulsion zone-throughs.
Sandra Trowan fits your pattern of the process side rather than the sudden death side. She's an example of how a system reacts when someone inside Jet Propulsion Laboratory tries to surface a potentially explosive security issue, and the reflex is quite quiet containment, not transparent inquiry. Sandra M. Trowan is a Caltech applied physics professor who worked on a Pentagon-funded space propulsion project carried out at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which Caltech manages. In 2010, she says she discovered that a postdoctoral researcher on her team had transmitted restricted technical data to an associate in Israel, and he'd posted it on a public website in potential violation of US export control laws. Well, why would you do that? Now, you saw the police raiding my house over this, looking for material on Jet Propulsion Laboratories back in 2014, just after I'm invited out for beers with the minister. Hello? Someone want to interview me? Read my UN document? Anybody? I'll take anybody. Was I in touch with Sandra Trowan? I don't know. I can't recall. She repeatedly asked Caltech administration to remove the researcher from the project, revoke access to sensitive files, and report the breach. According to her lawsuit, they refused in part because Caltech's multi-billion-dollar Jet Propulsion Laboratory management contract with NASA was up for renewal. And then add in Elon Musk and all these Indian and other Chinese HB1 visas are getting in. They're bringing in all these assets all the time. Around 2012, FBI agents approached her as part of a broader probe into possible export control violations and espionage. She cooperated and disclosed both the technical breach and Caltech's inaction. I was in jail at that stage. Her suit filed in 2014 in Los Angeles Superior Court. That was when I was raided by the police. Was I in touch with Sandra Trowan? I can't recall. It's very blurry. Her suit filed in and why would anyone care? I'm just a mentally ill homosexual drug dealer. It's just so funny. I mean, someone asked me a question, will you? Los Angeles County Superior Court alleges that she's Jewish, by the way. After that, she spoke with the FBI Caltech. Yes, another Jew exposing the conspiracy. Falsely accused her of research being contact, blah, 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 just went after her. Now, how this ties in with the JPL missing scientist theme. Trowan is inside the very institutional nexus you've been tracking: Caltech, NASA, JPL, Pentagon-funded propulsion work, foreign Israeli connections. Her story is not about a scientist disappearing, but about the system instinct to suppress and punish internal reporting. Yeah, like I was punished. That would be right. When it threatens contracts, prestige, or bilateral relationships, or just plain embarrassment. The line she reportedly heard, Caltech doesn't like its people calling the authorities, is almost a textbook illustration of the quiet containment culture Peter Wright describes it. These things are handled quietly, they told me. Problems are to be handled internally or quietly, not exposed to outside investigators. So here is the postdoctoral guy who was handing over all the secrets to his friends back in Israel. The postdoctoral researcher named in Sandra Trowan's lawsuit and in contemporaneous reporting is Amir Gat. Not Amit Yoran, Amir Gat. We should have a great big deep on look into him. Gat was an Israeli postdoctoral research scholar in Trowan's Caltech lab working on a Pentagon-funded micropropulsion project carried out in collaboration with NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Trowan alleges that Gat sent restricted technical data to a contact at Technion, Israel Institute of Technology, and posted sensitive details about the propulsion system online in apparent violation of export control agreements they had signed. Her complaint also claims Gat stored sensitive information on his personal laptop, entered erroneous numbers into design codes, like when the Israelis were core coding the F-35 and putting in their programmable logic chips and destroying all the code and messing it up and then putting their own code in back there in Israel, something like that perhaps. Backdoors, via chips, Christomos, God mode unlocked, stored sensitive information in his personal laptop, posted about the system's operating principles in at least 65 separate online posts, and was found alone in a restricted experimental area at Caltech. According to Trowan, FBI counterintelligence agents later told her Gat was a focus of her broader investigation into violations and possible espionage and interviewed her about his activities. Gat later left Caltech in 2012 and returned to Israel, where he became an assistant professor of mechanical engineering at Technion. Wasn't in Unit 8200 or Telpiot program, was he? I wonder. Now think about the Binational Science Foundation tied in with Henry Kissinger. 1973, James Angleton's fired, Nixon goes, then Angleton goes, then MI5 Peter Wright retires. All the 1970s are an interesting decade. So he's never been charged or convicted. How interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, how interesting. And of course, Daniel Lewin, the first man to die on 9/11, graduate of Telpiot and Unit 8200, done his Special Forces training, and lo and behold, he's the first man to die on 9/11. You want to tie that in with a missing scientist or a dead scientist? How interesting. Past is prologue, ladies and gentlemen. Past is prologue. Well, let's bring this to an end with a little conclusion. I hope you enjoy this sort of stuff. I enjoy making these. If we understand the past, we can understand now and predict into the future. You've seen how this all ties in with Pax Silica, and I'm just getting people to talk about it is extremely difficult because we've got so much on. And of course, I do have a new Elgato Stream Deck thing. The reason there's so many distractions is partly because of this. Partly because of that, because they're going to keep this stuff going on for a long time. It's not the only reason, but it's a lot of the reason. You're going to see that a lot. We've seen how they were doing this back in the 40s and the 30s, but they were doing it well before then. We've seen in Australia, Kerry Packer with Abe Saffron, the master of sexual blackmail. We've seen the long history of Jews, the court Jews, the Hufjud, the noble families of Europe, the compromise, the intermarrying, the Book of Esther, changing names. The infiltration is so great. And then ironically, it's the Israeli press and Jews who are warning us about it. You try and find the European press or the UK press or the American press telling us about it. But why is it all in the Israeli press? Kind of ironic, don't you think? It's like rain. Really? How long is this going to go on for? How long? I don't think too much longer. I think there's going to be a break in the dam. That is my prediction. I think they're setting a few things up. You see them putting the bases in Israel. They're going to put nuclear reactors, AI, and it's going to be run by Americans. They say that explicitly. So clearly people are onto it. But are these things handled quietly? Are you going to just trust the plan? I don't know if we can afford to trust the plan. You might want to follow this up, and people have been following this up with their Congress people, with FBI, Mary, of course, doing all this stuff in the Republican Party, and Lee. One day I hope you will look upon your studio under their cheap, highly painful, eye-burning, cheap Chinese lights like I am right now. It's itching, my face itches, drives me insane. That there needs to be more. And ask yourself why I'm probably the only one truly focusing on this, though I have noticed it coming out more and more. Just bits and pieces here and there. It's definitely coming out. And the true ramifications of Epstein. He's one of dozens. He's the nice one. Where are all those missing 10-year-olds from the Eastern Bloc? Are they alive? Are they dead? When their orifices were ripped apart and they were bleeding from various parts of their body, were they put down quickly or were they tortured? I don't know. But, I think people want to know. And the sooner we see the back end of that orange clown, the better. The Republic does not hinge on that orange clown. We've got Peter Thiel's boyfriend, J.D. Vance, ready to step in. We've got Julio Iglesias, little Marco, You know, he doesn't have to step in. He's good as Secretary of State. Leave him there. It's not going away. Heritage is running things. Pentagon's running things. Bunch of Texas billionaires. Come on. It's time. Chabad Lubavitch. See how it all ties in. All of it. Nathaniel Rothschild. Baruch Lazar. City of London. There we are again. City of London. Back we go again. Look at all the personal ties to myself. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you will carry this message forward and start to think for yourself. You need to understand history so you will see through Candace Owens' bullshit and that little demon, that dog looking for a master, Tucker Carlson. He skunk works. He works for Murdoch. All of them are in on it. All of them. Giving us the limited hangout. Maybe we could work out 9/11 if only the CIA would release the files. Candace Owens has spent 8 minutes on 9/11. 8 minutes. And I looked hard with AI. Every video, including PragerU. Try and find 8 minutes. And I actually had high hopes. I thought something was going to break with her. Clearly not. With her homosexual, Lord Farmer boyfriend. With the beautiful Scottish Rite Masonry look. The Catholic Mason Candace Owens. Now you understand the past, you can understand the present and the future. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in interesting times. I leave you with the great F. Scott Fitzgerald, where is it? And Bill Cooper. Talk again real soon. F. Scott Fitzgerald, quote, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. One should, for example, be able to see that things are hopeless and yet be determined to make them otherwise. This philosophy fitted on to my early adult life when I saw the improbable, the implausible, often the impossible, come true."
What is our common bond truly? Freedom. Freedom. Without freedom, you can't be a Christian no matter what denomination you belong to. You can't be a Buddhist. You can't own a donut shop. You can't drive from here to Oregon. You can't be an American because that's what it's all about, and it's the only thing that it's all about, nothing else. Nothing else. It's about freedom. Only freedom.